Okay. We have a lot of people coming in. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Fern Lazar. I lead Finn Partners Health Practice, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. I should say good afternoon or evening, because I know there are a lot of people joining from all over the world. Before we dive in, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details. I will be asking each panelist a set of questions today, and then we'll move on to a group session where we'll have all the panelists jump in and answer different questions. During the call, if you have a question, please type it into the chat and we'll try to get to it towards the end of the call. So thank you. Our panel today is titled Shaping the Future of MedTech, Balancing Innovation, Regulation, and Healthcare Economics. We are standing at a very fascinating moment, an incredibly challenging crossroads in MedTech. Healthcare systems are facing unprecedented clinical and operational constraints. The days of innovation for innovation's sake, as we know, are over. Doctors can't just buy something and expect their hospitals to approve it. Providers are under immense pressure to achieve superior outcomes on the one hand, while working with tight budgets on the other. For those in R&D, this means that new solutions must demonstrate both measurable clinical value as well as clear economic value from day one. But as everyone on this Zoom call knows, as R&D leaders, you are navigating commercial reality, at the same time steering through all these crazy changing global regulatory frameworks, and in the background, ever-changing technology, which you have to balance and incorporate at the appropriate moments. So how do leaders adapt their pipelines accordingly? How do they balance breakthrough innovation with market realities and accelerate speed to market without compromising on safety? To help us untangle these very difficult questions, we are joined by a phenomenal group of experts who live these challenges every day. So let's meet our panelists. First, from Siemens Healthineers startup, we have Juergen Simon, VP and head of Siemens Healthineers Startup Connect. Next, we have Dr. Jonathan Vigdorchik, who's the Chief Science, Technology, and Medical Affairs Officer of Zimmer Biomet. From Braun, we have Youngji Fu, who's Vice President of Research and Development, Global Head of R&D and Testing Center. And finally, we have Guy Pellig, who's Vice President of Sales and Marketing from Tadiran Batteries. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today. It's a great honor. So I'm going to start out with some questions for Juergen. You're in the hot seat, Juergen. Okay. So startups are famously driven by blue sky disruptive thinking, but health systems now demand value on day one, like we talked about before. When you're evaluating early stage technology for Startup Connect, how has your assessment criteria changed, or maybe it hasn't?
It certainly has to some extent. Yeah, I would say it has become more closely focused on our business or on the adjacencies of our business. Because if we search for startups to work with in those areas, we know, or at least we think we know, how we can get to a sensible ROI, and there's not so much risk associated with turning those corporations with startups into a business. Yeah. Also, I think we put greater emphasis on the maturity of a startup. For us, maturity of a startup means we can immediately try out the solutions they have in hand and see if the solution holds water. And if it can do what it's supposed to do for our business.
So interesting. So what are traditional stage gate processes still effective for nurturing early innovation, or are you using other models or approaches? And I take it from your last answer that your preference is to partner with a bit later stage at this point.
Yeah, that's correct. And I would say, I mean, to a large extent, of course, stage gate processes are still needed and are still effective, especially in partnering, right? Because in the end, what do you really do? You look for first of all, you look for the fields that your company or your internal partners are interested in. So where you feel you have a gap in your portfolio, I would already call that a stage. And then quite traditionally, you go from long list to short list and evaluate the solutions based on the information that you have from various startups and decide for maybe 1 or 3 partners to run a proof of concept project with them, and then decide if one is good enough. So that you could call almost a traditional stage gate process, but then again, also in the end, you have to have some openness in case something interesting comes along, and that I would call the not so stage gate focused process, and maybe an agile process, where we identify during an interaction with an institution, during us being present at some startup events or being in the jury of some startups contest throughout the world, where we then run into a startup where we think, hey, we haven't actually looked for that, but from all that we know about our business, from all that we know about the interactions with various stakeholders in our organization, this startup would really make an excellent fit. And then you have to be quick, of course. I would say, especially in Asia, you have to be quick and interact with that startup and come to a conclusion quickly if that would be a good business partner for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such an interesting time. What about what's the biggest barrier you're seeing to adoption post-launch for some of these early disruptive concepts? And is there any way that R&D can address it earlier in the cycle? So and again, maybe that's aided by some of the changes we're seeing in technology. And I use the 2 letters AI, but
yeah, of course, that's what's in everybody's mind when we think about startups these days, and rightly so. And that's maybe also a good example for your question. I think actually the biggest barrier for getting those solutions out in the market and being successful with them is does the customer think it's worth trying? Because when you bring those new ideas to market, I mean, this is not even of course, the pricing has to be sensible and everything, but you're coming with something new around the corner, with something that maybe requires a little bit of flexibility on the customer's end and requires the time of the customer and the trust that is actually worth his time, or her time, and so getting the customer convinced to try your new solution, to really seriously think about what it does for his or her workflow, to understand how it compares to other solutions, which is also really important, and to really, again, get them to pick up your solution, try it out, and then make a decision on whether this is something they want to continuously use in their institution. And what can R&D do about this? And also let's pick a little bit from my previous experience in various R&D roles, as well as for my current role. And I look at the whole product life cycle. If you say R&D, a lot of the points are already need to be addressed in product definition and requirement engineering, and to then be really in the customer's head, so to speak, and make the barrier for adoption for the customer, even for trying it out, as low as possible, and especially make sure that the customer only has as minimal alterations to his or her own workflow as possible. And you reach it, I think, by, again, having your teams being very close to the customer, which I would say for startups is easier than at least to have a large portion of their R&D force close to the customer, as sometimes is for big companies. And so I would encourage every startup to make use of that possibility to have their R&D teams closely aligned with the customers.
Do you think that healthcare systems are more inclined to test drive with early stage companies than with larger companies, or is that what I'm reading here, or are they
Um,
just more nimble and they can sort of like slip in easier?
it's I would say it's a little bit of both, yeah. So on the one hand, they are more nimble, and I mean, if you're responsible for a larger R&D organization, I mean, you can't have all your, I don't know, 500, 1,000, 2,000 R&D employees sit on the lap of customers all the time. When you have a small R&D team, you actually can embed them with the customer, yeah, and embed them closely to the customer's processes. Of course, also not all the time. Also, like percentage-wise, you have an edge there, and also, at least in my experience, also talking to some of the companies we have acquired and where people now work in our company, and you ask them what has changed, is a little bit the forgiveness on the customer side for errors. Yeah. If you're a startup, you can try out things, and if it doesn't work out, and you help the customer on the spot, yeah, the customer will say it's okay. Yeah. If you come in with a big brand name, and we have a lot of big brand names today around the table, you know, your CEO might get a call, yeah, because something hasn't worked, yeah. These guys have told him or her it should work, and it doesn't, yeah. So that's the level of expectation is quite different, yeah. And that leads you to not being so experimental, I would say.
So this is a perfect time to segue to Jonathan. You knew I was going to do that, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of big companies who have great reputations, so how are you finding that the Zimmer Bio? I mean, you're a surgeon as well as a technology officer, so you sort of like see both views. How is Zimmer Biomet approaching these challenges, and are you able to, do you have to be as nimble? Can you be as nimble as some of these startups? And what are you doing right now that you weren't before when it comes to sort of the R&D, like looking at R&D?
Yeah, I mean, we are a big, massive organization that, moves at the speed of a cruise ship. But within that, if you set up the organization correctly, you can have nimble units inside that can accomplish some things, obviously, all metered by regulatory. That's going to be something that kind of slows down our innovation cycle because we have to go through the proper R&D processes, but then also get FDA clearance, and especially as we evolve into the EU. So when we're looking at these hospital systems, yeah, I've got an interesting perspective because I am an employee. I used to work at a hospital. I still do surgery. Right now, I'm an employee of a big Zimmer Biomet company. When I was operating all the time, these small startup companies would come to us with really innovative new products that would change my practice. Starting with these ambient AI listening for medical record notes. And the smaller companies can innovate much quickly and get us, like you said, forward deployed engineers that would sit in my office, troubleshoot with me, and we would solve problems together. However, from the hospital perspective, they didn't want to partner with the small companies because they didn't want 27 different startups. They wanted one big box solution that could do everything. And that's the interesting kind of challenge between what Juergen was talking about, having these nimble startup companies versus the big box solution where maybe the hospital CIO was willing to say, you may not have the most innovative, latest technology that the startup does, but I can do it all in one-stop shopping. Right? It's a very interesting dichotomy that was taking place. And it's the same now on the Zimmer Biomet on the implant side. It used to be that the surgeon, the number one thing that drove implant utilization was what the surgeon trained on in practice. And now we have to sit with the hospital CEO, CFO, CIO, and deliver to them why our implant is, differentiated, or our ecosystem somehow differentiated from any other competitor. And it can't really just be only on price. So I think that our mindset is really shifting from just providing implants to what other value can we provide to the hospital and the surgeon, right, in terms of these latest innovations as well, instead of just implant companies.
Let's continue on that, Jonathan, because I think it's super fascinating, and we are seeing this all over. What what additional value are, I mean, maybe I'm asking you something that, giving you away your secret sauce here, but what additional value are you talking about? Educational opportunities? Are you talking like beta testing for follow-up lines? And I'm interested both from, let's call it the CFO's perspective, right? Because they're looking at every single line of business at a hospital, as well as as the orthopedic chair, right? So what are you selling in?
Well, yeah, it's a little bit different for both. If I'm going to the surgeon specifically, how can I make the surgeon's life easier, right? The surgeon is ultimately the customer, but so is the patient, right? The patient benefits from the surgeon doing a perfect surgery. So if we look at the surgeon specifically, what does the surgeon do prior to surgery? They sit down, they look at their x-rays. First, they make a diagnosis whether it's the right operation or not. Then they have to plan that operation, right? And it takes them 10, 15 minutes potentially per patient to plan correctly the surgery. Then they need to go to the surgery and make sure that they execute it perfectly. And the more confidence you have in the execution of the surgery, the better you're going to sleep at night, for lack of a better way to describe it. And then you need to know how your patients are doing. So we can think about the patient life cycle as this whole entire continuum of care, from preoperative planning to surgical execution to tracking how your patients are doing, and then make benefits incrementally for the surgeon's lives and patients' lives in each one of those. The CFO, he doesn't really care about that, right? He cares about how much is this robot going to cost me? How much is the surgery going to cost me? And are my patients going to be readmitted, because that's going to bust my bundles in this bundled payments or capitated environments that they're sitting in. So how do we help from an implant company perspective doing that? Well, with robotic surgery, with better surgical planning, with better execution, hopefully the outcomes are better, and we've proven that they can be. Hopefully our readmissions are better, which decreases costs. Hopefully we can increase surgical efficiency, so you can do more surgeries by the same surgeon in the same operating room throughout the day. So everything, you're hitting both top line and bottom line revenue in terms of looking at that. So the conversations are different from the health system versus how they are from the surgeon perspective.
Interesting. Let's maybe look at the evolving regulatory framework, because that's another set of where they change the goalpost every week, it seems. So how is the Zimmer Biomet R&D organization, how do you manage against the, maybe is there divergence between the US and, let's say, the EU and other major markets, or are they coming more aligned? And how is the R&D organization adapting to kind of take that into consideration?
Well, the first adaptation is working really closely with RA and QA, our regulatory and quality advisors, really from that checkpoint, that gate zero that we were talking about earlier. They need to be intimately involved from designing, planning the process, because a lot of the choices that are happening early on are affecting their lives, 6 months, 2 years down the road, which will then affect our regulatory timeline. So involving them very early in the process. We are starting to leverage some AI tools that can help with a lot of the documentation that then can need to be checked by the human in the loop in terms of the RAQA process, which is helping. But in terms of the regulatory process, FDA versus European, they're not quite going they're diverging, I think. EU is becoming more difficult. We know with MDR, with the European AI Act, these are very high bars that are there for protection of safety of the patients and for security and data privacy. And the FDA also has strict guidelines on these things, but almost not as strict, I would say. So when we're planning these things, we need to think about involving them very early in the process. And then also there's a global perspective. Can we get it FDA submitted? Because if you can get something FDA submitted, then you can launch it in certain countries, which all they care about is that you've submitted to the FDA.
Yeah.
Other countries require you to have FDA clearance, and then they'll look at your product, and you can leverage your FDA clearance versus us having to submit for MD-SAP, CE marking, MDR, all these different things that you have to do. So I think you have to think about it holistically now. You can't just say, I'm going to launch in the US, then I'm going to launch in Europe. You need to think strategically. And even in Europe, you need to pick which countries you want to go after first.
Right.
Because UK, whether that's part of Europe or now, I don't know. But UK is different.
Changes by the day.
Countries.
Tomorrow could be different.
Different than Switzerland, Australia, different, New Zealand, different than different Asia Pacific companies or countries. So got to think more strategically about it.
And I'm going to throw in the one group that gives everybody a little bit of a heartburn, payers. And clearly we're talking about different phenomena when we're talking US versus the rest of the world, where we have health systems and national health systems involved. How early on are you socializing some of your R&D with payers? I've heard different things from different companies. Some companies feel like if payers know what's coming at them in 5 years or 3 years, they can better adapt and plan, and they perceive less risk. But I'm curious to see what you think about that.
Yeah, we have to do it early on. I think the more involved that they are, the better. When they know what's coming, especially if we're launching a new CT-based robotic platform, right? Somebody needs to pay for the CT scan, and if the CT scan is not going to be approved, then we're going to have trouble scaling that business. If you think in Europe they get less CT scans because they have more costs, and they're more cognizant of these costs in the system. So in Europe, do we need to have a different type of strategy or not? You need to think about this from both the payer perspective and the patient and surgeon perspective, what they're going to use too. What we're finding is that different business models as well. In Germany, there's no sales rep that's in the surgical case. So can we launch a robot where there's no sales rep in the surgical case, and it runs easy enough that it can be run by just the surgeon or the nurses? Whereas in the United States, every single case has a sales rep there that can assist with some of the robotics or technologies. So there are multiple layers here to kind of unpack when you're thinking about these things.
Interesting. Thank you. We're going to move on to Yongji. Thank you. So Dr. Fu, Braun handles high volume infrastructure like infusion therapy and diabetes care. Given the tightening hospital margins and the pressure to treat these categories as commodities, which is like a bad word, right, for us, is very, very high. How are you deploying technologies like machine learning and advanced sensing to help build premium clinical value without inflating unit production costs and making hospital CFOs go crazy?
Sure. So first of all, our observation is our customers' expectation really moved from the single discrete products to a more holistic integrated solutions. So I can use maybe infusion therapy as an example. We see many hospitals, not only in the US, in Europe, we have also seen, for example, in Korea, in Singapore, they all want to establish this kind of vascular access team so that they build a group of specialists to deal with this one particular topic so that they can improve the patient certification and also make sure they have a very tight infection control, and automatically that's drive to a better clinical outcome and patient certification. So to achieve that, what they are looking for is really not really single product. Like you mentioned, if we compete with the product price, then it's really become a dead end. I mean, this is commodities, and this is really not our business model. So we have to understand what kind of value we can bring, and that's actually a very, very good thing. So the relationship between us and the hospital is no longer we are selling something to them. We are rather a partner with them, and we are facing the same kind of problem together. And how to do this? So, I mean, as the technologist, when we enter a problem, including myself, we get excited about AI, about digital sensing, all these exciting technologies. However, I have to say we always have to start with customer value. In this case, what kind of value we can bring to the clinicians. And there is only one way to think about that. we forget about technology for this moment. We go to the hospital, we observe what the clinicians has been using our product, and we really have a deep understanding of their workflow. So sometimes we call this hospital immersion for engineers. We also call it Gamba. It's completely the same thing. We go to the site and understand the reality. And then from there, we can go back, we can do the brainstorming and start thinking, well, if the answer is AI, is sensor, or is something else. So this is the opportunity we can connect the dots and start building values for our customer. And of course, we need also clinical evidence to prove to the CFO, like you mentioned, so that we help them understand that what we are offering is not a different price. We are offering is to solve their problems and using healthcare economics models to convince them that this truly brings them values instead of just have a different price tag. That would be my initial answer for this question.
It seems there's a very familiar theme here where everybody's starting to partner with hospitals and other healthcare entities earlier on than ever before. So I think that's a great takeaway for our audience. What about more complex and longer development cycles for some of your high volume clinical products? And how do you manage that but still compete, because innovation moves as fast as the speed of light these days? So
you are absolutely right. So as R&D organizations, we are always measured by speed. In our words, time to market. This is really, really key. And I have to say that our benchmark is not the peer companies we had before. And we have some newcomers. So for example, the companies from China and India, they adapt really a much accelerated cycles, and we have to compete and we have to match. So that means we have to make sure that we are also very, very fast. And you are also very right. So now we are dealing with a much more sophisticated project. So not only we still need to deal with mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, so on and so forth. Like Jonathan well mentioned, we also need to engage with the regulatory affair at the very beginning. Very true, fully agreed. And we also need to engage with, for example, the manufacturing engineers at the beginning, so that we can achieve the design for manufacturability. This is another very important aspect, especially when we deal with large volume, high quality products. And there are many, many different parties we have to take consideration. That means the requirement for the project managers is very, very high. Fortunately, a lot of work which they have been doing in the past can be automatic. However, I have to say that there is still this personal touch. So we cannot really replace the personal side. So when there is a delay of the project, we cannot just ask a machine and hope we can get the answer. So we have to work very closely with many different parties, and we have to think from day one. I fully agree. We have to think all these aspects from day one. Then we really can make sure we do it right from the very beginning.
So within Braun, where are you seeing the most bottlenecks in the clinical trials, in prototyping, in data integration, just cross-functional coordination? What are the biggest bottlenecks that you face, that you get that phone call in the middle of the night or the morning that you're like, oh no?
Sure. Great question. Actually, all the topics you mentioned are very, very important. All those things, so actually we put a lot of efforts. And if I have to pick one, I probably want to start with data integration. So because this is internal, this is also external, this is a lot of times also not very much under our control. We have to also understand the regulatory requirements. There is also a lot of systems that is not designed to be integrated. So now we realize the data integration, data mining is truly valuable, but we have to also find ways to adapt whatever we get. That's really a barrier that we face, and I believe this is also what hospital is facing. I also frequently discussed with CIOs, CEOs in the hospital. They also talk about this, how to bring the scalability of the data, and this can really empower us about AI, about smart solutions. So this would be something that I want to put more focus on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Guy now. Guy, your firm represents an essential component of the hardware supply chain. And as R&D engineers build increasingly data-heavy, continuous remote monitoring tools, power demands are growing. We hear this all the time, going to outer space, going to remote places to build these power supplies. Yet many providers expect zero maintenance lifespans to minimize labor costs. And so how is battery innovation stepping up to prevent power from becoming an economic bottleneck? What can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Yes, thank you. I think that you said the important word, it's power. Power, eventually, this is something that's common to all of us. It's cost markets, cost functions, and especially cost. Every tool that we are using, and we are especially discussing about the MedTech, every tool needs power. But I think that safe costing is important, but not the most important here parameter that we are using. I think that Jonathan mentioned as a surgical, you want to have, I would say, clean room. You don't need to have any wires. You don't need to have any cables. You need to have the units very light. If it's a driller or somebody or any machine that you are using. So in those cases, you want to have an innovation. You have to have the small factor that we can support, to have the smaller factor as we can, form factor here. I think that those parameters are very crucial. But eventually, one of the main crucial parameters is when are we involved in this stage. In order to cost save, you need to see how early. I think that Dr. Fu mentioned that as early as you can to be in this process, and also Jonathan mentioned that will cost save eventually, because if you have a startup and you're producing some kind of or preparing or doing a research of some kind of a unit, eventually you have the size, you take the power as a commodity, you're treating this in later stage of the project, and you have the size set already, you have the electronics, you have everything inside, and you're ready to set the units and say, okay, I'm on time. Then at the moment that you are reaching to the last stages and you want, let's say you have a week or two to submit your project to be on time, then you realize that the size is not good. You need to have enough power in order to support what you need. You need to have the right battery. You need to have the right source. And if you don't have it, you're going to fail to submit on time. It's going to be late. It's going to cost you more because maybe you already produced something, you need to change all the units and you need to go back again. As early as we are going to be involved, that's the step, that's the place that we can support you in cost saving eventually, to have a lighter product that the surgeon will be happy with that. And I think that this will help you to think together, how can I use this power to be an enabler and not a stopper for your project?
That's great. Very interesting. Again, earlier the better, we're hearing is a common
Absolutely.
theme.
Yes.
So what about when we know there are pricing pressures, we know that in health there are now increased emphasis on value. We've heard that from everyone. How do these two factors influence your component design parameters and your feature sets for your customers' devices? So yeah, so how are you rethinking that, or how are you doing that differently?
I think it's, as the world leader in lithium thionyl solution, I think that we are all the time looking to have more and more advanced, to have different materials inside of the battery in order to have it cheaper, to have it for a long lasting. And one thing that is important that as we have a long lasting product, think about that you are going to use a driller, for example. After each surgery, you're going to throw the batteries out. It's not sterilized. You're using it only for, and you're going to contaminate the earth. So from sustainability perspective and cost saving, you want to have something that can last 100, 200 surgery, that you can use it. You can use your product, you can put it into autoclave, for example, that our batteries are going as a very harsh condition and very high and low temperature that you can use it. So I want to give an example, one company that came to us and asked in the last stages of the project and said, okay, we want to have a product that can survive autoclave and we want to use it for, 100 cycles. And we said, okay, we have a solution, we can support this. And then we realized that they need a form factor that was very small and it was not fit into their product. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of extra money that they spent in order to have the product ready, in order to have the product that they can use it. So there is a lot of pressure coming from companies to have it lighter, to have it cheaper, but eventually you need to have, in MedTech, you need to have the highest quality that you can. So yes, you can save some money, but eventually if you have a product that can last for 100 cycles, you're going to save money eventually for the long run, if it's going to last. But you need to make sure that the quality is right. You need to make sure that you're on time, and you need to make sure that your audience, your surgeons, your people that are using, even the patient that are using a unit, taking, when he's hospitalized, he's taking the unit, if it's mobile or not. That's an important parameter to understand, that you need to have something that lasts and it can be cost save eventually. Don't think on the next step, on the next 5 minutes, okay, I can cost save here, but for the long run, you're going to cost save if you have a reliable product that will not stop during the surgery, and it's going to be very strong, and you're going to have the power that you need.
Thank you, Guy. Yeah, and if we look at your development cycles, like everything's getting faster and shorter, how are you looking at your new product development cycles? So looking at maybe something that's breakthrough versus something that's incremental, but perhaps is better battery elongation. So how do you balance those two? Because you're in a potentially high volume business too, so could be quite lucrative if you pick the right horse.
Yes, you need to take some risk. We have some batteries that we did a research, I think 8 or 10 years ago, and now we are using them. So you need to think well in advance. You need to think where the market is going. For example, in military defense, when you're looking for product in military defense, you used to take a product that can last for 15 years in your warehouse, and no one thought about this. Okay, you take something, you use it, but those products need to last, need to wait there in the warehouse, so you need a long-lasting product. When you think about where the MedTech are going, I mentioned a few times, form factor, you need to make sure that you have it smaller as possible, lighter as possible. And again, you need to see the trends. You need to see the market trends. You need to think well in advance. And when you're a stable company, you need to make sure that you put the money all the time in research, to think about the next product. Sometimes you take risks. Sometimes you see product that you're not going to launch it for 10 years. And then after, our company is here for more than 50 years, and you see product involved. And then you see that, yes, we are waiting to the right time, and the right time will come. So you have the product, you do the research, trust what you're doing, and you will be there to support the next stage of the market.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to take that question and open it up because I think it's on everybody's mind. So how do we, let's start, we'll call it portfolio trade-offs, right? And I'm going to ask some of the larger players who are actually the ones on the front lines of innovation to opine. Maybe we'll start with Juergen. How are you managing those internal trade-offs between breakthrough innovation and these small incremental improvements that your customers are asking for today? So how are you looking at that?
Yeah, first of all, this is a great question, which always means it's a very difficult answer. I would say, of course, the whole market, our customers, and also I would say our organization is a little bit trending to what I would call added value innovations, because I don't like incremental, honestly. I think there's a lot of smaller innovations that add really great value to your products, really great value for the patients. So, but I think it's fair to say a larger part of the efforts is focused on that. So, and then the only way that I know of is to make up your mind what percentage of all your resources, what percentage of all your efforts you want to focus really on breakthrough innovations. Yeah, so you decide on a certain part of your R&D budget, on a certain part of your FTEs, that you say, hey, these guys, I will give the freedom to actually go out there and try to find really cool and really groundbreaking stuff. Yeah, and that's the mechanism I know about it. But happy to hear about others.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a bit of risk there, yeah, which is fun, but also, may not pay off, right, as soon as you think. So how about you, Jonathan? How does Zimmer Biomet balance those two trade-offs?
Well,
or maybe
things,
they're not
right?
trade-offs,
They're not really trade-offs because the customer is always going to say, and I want this now. And if I start developing it now, that means 2 years from now, right? Or 18 months, because of 6 months development and then a year or 6 months of regulatory, right? It's always, you can't have it right now. So you have to be forward thinking. And like Juergen said, one of the first things I did when I started at Zimmer Biomet was establish this strategic R&D group, almost like this Google X type of factory where I've got people who are only working on future groundbreaking innovation. And that they need to be sequestered off. They need to be doing new technologies with the plan, though, of integrating those into our existing R&D pipeline. Those things come in twofold. You can either go out and acquire some new technology that you can do, versus organic growth within our own company. Take something we already have and give an incremental innovation, which makes it groundbreaking technology. So we do have to balance both, whether it's taking our existing robotic pipeline, what features can we add to that in a few years, versus is there anything else we should go acquire that's going to change the world for us? But how do those merge in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now? It needs to be thought about from the holistic level. So it's kind of a combination of what Juergen said, right? It has to be thought about holistically and sequester off this team to go play, go build.
I think I want to be on those teams. That sounds like a great job, right? Young Ji, what about you? How does B. Braun look at this?
Sure. This is indeed a very great and challenging question, and also the two gentlemen already gave brilliant answers, so make my position even more tough. So let me give a try. So I think both Juergen and Jonathan covered very well. I really like the word balance. So we need to find a very good balance between these two ends of the spectrum. And we tend to probably skew to the shorter term ones because, this is firefighting, this is your bonus for this year. But we do need to keep in mind that we need this balance. As Juergen clearly brought up, you need to set a distribution or allocation of your resource for these two different types of innovation and then stick with it. So even though there are some things that is really critical, you have to work very hard. We have to keep in mind we cannot compromise the future for the current situation. Get a good balance, implement with the discipline would be my answer for this.
Thank you. Yes, I think we have some consensus there about. I'm sure the devil is in the details, as they say, and every day is a new adventure. But I think that's very, very good advice to folks on the call. Let's look at R&D decision making. And Guy, what role are health economics and outcomes data? What role are they playing earlier in your R&D development cycle, and how are you looking at this?
When you look in the R&D, it's you have people that are working here for 45 years that have enough experience, and together with the balance that was mentioned here, that are young people that come in with new crazy ideas. So you have this balance. You have always the balance here to make sure that when someone more mature say, okay, guys, this is too much. You're going far. So to balance the cost here that you are spending in this spend of money in order to make sure that you have this future inside, and to think wisely, and then to take those crazy little people, those that are coming with the great ideas, to take them and try to balance and to say, okay, we need to make sure that we are not, so you have a certain amount of budget that you need to make sure that you are inside this budget. And you need to make sure that you're taking this project all the time, one step ahead and ahead and ahead, and to make sure that you have the right product and the right innovation. So those are considerations that we are taking. We need to make sure, again, that you have a breakthrough. You can't have something that, okay, take the same product and just change it. You're looking for a real breakthrough for the future. So this is the major parameter for us to say that this is something sustainable.
Thank you. Youngji, are customers, so providers, payers, patients maybe, are they demanding different types of innovation than, let's say, 5 years ago?
Sure. Fundamentally, I wouldn't say so. I think we are still dealing with human beings, and our mission is to improve their health, to try to help them deal with certain diseases. But there are certainly also fundamental change from the expectation from our customers. So, for example, besides the great clinical outcome, they are probably also looking for more transparency, and they will probably want to be more involved in the decision-making process. And they are not only expect, they do not only expect that when they go to the hospital, they get their health situation addressed. They also want to have a very good satisfaction. So all this we have to also take into consideration in our product design. I would say these are challenges, but also great opportunities in front of us. I can also give an example. I see in many countries there is this trend to move a lot of patients from the acute care settings in the hospital to home. And home setting is a completely different game. And of course, there are a lot of benefits. But meanwhile, the involvement level of the patients is much, much higher because the clinicians are not surrounded anymore. So we have to think about this change and try to be proactive and make sure that we can also bring the kind of value to them as well. So yeah, so there will be a significant change for us.
Very interesting. Home care and connected health, right? Connected care,
Absolutely.
I think is and yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it moves in a good direction and it stays safe, right?
For sure.
Let's. I know we have probably some people who are earlier in their career. What type of person can succeed in MedTech R&D today? What are the skills they need? What's the mindset? Maybe we'll start with Jonathan on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to have, number one, always question everything, right? The only rule that applies are the rules of physics, right? That's first principles, Elon Musk, right? That you got to question everything. And the second thing is, if you're not using AI, your job will be replaced by someone who is using AI, right? It's not that AI is taking your job; it's the person using AI will take your job. So it's almost weekly now that I sit in calls with my teams, and I always ask them, what are we using? How are you using Quad Code? How are you using Quad Code Work? How many agents have you built? That should take you an hour or a weekend. Why are you telling me it's going to take 6 months and $500,000 when, a teenager could do it over the weekend for $50? These conversations are real time. They're happening. So those are skills that I think are mandatory, always questioning things, learning how to use AI. And then we're left with just the emotional intelligence piece. How do you interact with people? How do you build teams together that are going to work together to change the world?
Interesting. Juergen, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, if I can give a different answer.
You don't have to. It could be the same.
No. I think so. The one thing I would really say that's important is really excitement about the job, because MedTech healthcare is a fantastic industry, and that is the one industry where you can, work on super exciting technologies, earn some good money, and help people. So, and if this doesn't get you excited, you're probably not a good fit for the healthcare and medtech industry, because I've talked to many colleagues. Siemens is a big organization, and I've talked to many colleagues who come from other Siemens businesses where they ticked one of the three boxes, where they said, hey, healthcare really ticks, medtech really ticks all of those boxes, and I think, if you're not excited about working in healthcare and medtech, you're probably not in the right place.
Who could not be excited about it? I wake up every day just thrilled to learn about all the new things that you all are inventing. Young-ji, what about you? What are you seeing? What are you looking for when you're hiring folks for your team?
Sure. I would always hire someone who has the passion. So go to the hospitals, speak with some friends or some neighbors or colleagues who has experienced this kind of healthcare journey and understand their challenges and how MedTech help them. So that's really remind us that how fortunate we are, how significant our works are, and why this innovation is so important for all of us. So that would be the starting point from my view.
I thank you for grounding us. That makes me so happy, because it does start with the patient, and too often we leave the patient out of the equation, and we know what happens when we do that. Guy, you want to take a shot at that when you're looking to hire for your teams? What kind of person are you looking for?
I fully agree with all three of them, and I like the perspective of, if you don't know how to use AI, not AI will replace you. Thank you for that, by the way, Jonathan. Another person that uses an AI will replace you. So you're afraid all the time that the AI will replace you, and it's not the truth. And I truly believe in people that understand their customers, that go and look in their eyes and go to the field and understand what they need. Ask them. You need to write a person that knows how to ask the question, what question to ask. The interaction between the people will give us more than AI, will give us more than everything, because this is something that cannot be replaced. You sometimes, when you interrogate a customer, he understands things that you ask, what he really needs. And sometimes he just come, okay, I need a solution for that. But during the call, during the discussion, both of you understand what is the right fit for him. So the interaction between people is so important. So I'm looking someone that needs to interact, needs to speak, needs to listen, and then to build the solution.
I hear communications as a very vital tool. Not that I'm prejudiced about that, but yes, I think being able to communicate is important. So we have exactly 1 minute left. And so we're going to do a quick lightning round. One last question. What emerging challenge or challenges do you think the industry is underestimating right now? And we're going to start with Youngji.
Emerging challenges, I would say, is still from the regulatory side. We have a lot of great technologies, and we have to be ready for this.
Jonathan.
Our challenges are partly with investors, I think. I mean, if you look at MedTech as a whole this year, it's been a bloodbath. It doesn't mean that we're not innovating and we're going to be tremendously successful, but a lot of money is pivoting towards, 10x, 100x AI investments, and it makes a difficult environment for advancing R&D in our types of worlds.
Yes, and we'll see what that other R&D delivers. How about you, Juergen? Emerging challenges.
Emerging challenges, maybe a little edgy one. With all the great things that come up with Gen AI, and I love Gen AI and I use it a lot, but an upcoming generation of software developers that has never coded without Gen AI, I think might be, because right now we have a really good mix of people doing it, but still understanding it. So I will see if the generation comes out which has never coded without Gen AI. I like to see that.
And we haven't even talked about cybersecurity intentionally, just so you know.
Really?
So,
Yeah.
But Guy, you'll get the last word here. What emerging challenges are people missing?
I think that we are living in a fast track, and this is getting faster and faster, even every day that moves, and it will get faster and
Yes.
more and more faster. You need to adjust, you need to be there. But again, you need to think from the beginning. If you want to be fast, you need to start to think from the early stages of the project to see what do we need, how do I use it, and how do I have the partners together with me, everybody on the same plate to think together. It will be faster and adaptable.
Thank you. And thank you all for a fantastic discussion about the future of MedTech R&D. I know that everyone on the call has learned about a lot. I have certainly. And I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you have additional questions, you can send them to us and we will parse them out to the individual speakers or have them all respond if you like. But thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. Really amazing, amazing insights. So have a great evening, have a great afternoon, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
Bye for now.